The stale air in the cramped, grimy apartment hung heavy, thick with the scent of old cigarettes and desperation. Outside, the perpetual twilight of the city's underbelly bled through the streaked window panes, painting the urban sprawl in hues of gray and shadow. Inside, Ben Carter, or rather his current persona, Jax, was a study in controlled decay. His clothes were perpetually disheveled, a weak stubble shadowed his gaunt face, and his eyes, though bloodshot from sleepless nights, held a disquieting intensity, a constant, vigilant scan of his desolate surroundings. The hollow ache in his gut, a familiar companion from skipped meals and nervous energy, was almost a comfort now, a reminder of the mission. He sat hunched over a scarred wooden table, meticulously documenting every illicit transaction, every whispered secret in a worn, nondescript notebook. The cheap pen scratched softly across the pages, each line a testament to his dangerous, thankless work. He was deep undercover, burrowed into the seedy network of street-level corruption, painstakingly tracing the dirty money and influence upwards towards its source. That source, he knew, sat in an opulent, seemingly legitimate world, far removed from the grit and grime of Jax's existence. Judge Alistair Finch, a man of impeccable reputation and chilling power, was his ultimate target. The contrast between Ben's dedicated, dangerous work and the judge's gilded life was a stark, bitter irony that fueled his relentless pursuit. He was a ghost in the machine, a silent observer in a world that thrived on shadows, his quiet isolation a self-imposed prison for the greater good. The personal cost was immense, a constant gnawing at the edges of his soul. One bitterly cold evening, a nervous young man named Marco, a low-level informant Ben was cultivating, burst into the apartment, pale and trembling. Marco had been pressured by Finch's network to plant incriminating evidence on an innocent, small-time shop owner who had refused to pay protection money. If he didn't comply, Marco's younger sister, who worked at the shop, would be handled. It was a classic trap, designed to ensnare the innocent and solidify the syndicate's control. Ben's first instinct, honed by years of training, was to maintain distance, to protect his cover at all costs. Exposing himself to help a peripheral player was an unnecessary risk, a potential blow to the entire operation. But as he looked at Marco's terrified eyes that reminded him fleetingly of someone else, a deep-seated humanity beneath his hardened exterior stirred. This wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was about preventing an innocent person from being crushed by the very corruption he sought to dismantle. "Where's the drop point?" Ben asked, his voice low, deceptively calm. He spent the next 3 hours using his limited resources and extensive network of illicit contacts, orchestrating a complex, risky maneuver. He didn't blow Marco's cover or reveal his own. Instead, he subtly rerouted the planted evidence, causing it to be lost in transit, creating just enough chaos and confusion within the syndicate to buy the shop owner precious time. He then anonymously tipped off a trusted, uncorrupted junior detective he knew, providing just enough ambiguous information to spark an official, legitimate investigation into the protection racket, forcing the syndicate to pull back from the shop for fear of exposure. The shop owner remained safe, oblivious to the unseen hand that had intervened, and Marco, though shaken, was spared from complicity. This quiet act, a subtle intervention to prevent a small-time offender from being unfairly entrapped, put Ben's cover at extreme risk, but it demonstrated his unwavering moral compass, revealing the profound integrity that solidified reader support. Beneath his rough, threadbare jacket, hidden from casual view, Ben frequently touched a worn, silver locket. It was smooth, cool against his skin, a constant tactile reminder of a past he rarely allowed himself to dwell on openly. During the long, lonely nights, he would sometimes pull out his burner phone, its screen cracked and grimy, and scroll to a single faded photograph. It showed a young woman with a bright, hopeful smile, her arm around a small child, their faces alight with an almost ethereal joy. Ben's usually impassive expression would soften, fleetingly, profoundly, with a raw sadness that spoke of immense, personal loss. The photograph was a silent, aching testament to a family he had loved, a life that had been tragically, unjustly stolen from him. He never spoke of them, not to his handler, not to anyone. The pain was too deep, too personal to articulate. But their memory was the fuel, the silent, burning core of his relentless pursuit of justice. The systemic corruption he sought to dismantle wasn't just a professional assignment. It was a deeply personal crusade, a way to reclaim something that had been lost, to honor a memory that would otherwise remain unavenged. The locket and the photograph were his seeds of mystery, hinting at a profound personal connection to the very corruption he battled, a past loss that inextricably linked him to Judge Alistair Finch, the man whose unyielding grip on justice had once, long ago, crushed his own world. The precarious balance of Ben Carter's undercover life, a tightrope walk between his fabricated identity and his true mission, was about to snap. The quiet hum of the city's underbelly, usually a backdrop to his calculated moves, now seemed to throb with an ominous beat. The whispers he'd meticulously tracked, the illicit transactions he'd cataloged, all led to this. His deep cover operation had reached its inevitable, critical point. It began on a frigid Tuesday morning. Ben, still Jax, was in the dilapidated warehouse that served as a low-level hub for Finch's network, seemingly brokering a deal for stolen electronics. Suddenly, the warehouse doors burst open, and a squad of uniformed officers swarmed in, sirens wailing in the distance. Ben was immediately singled out. He resisted just enough to make it believable, yet subtly complied, his mind already racing. He knew this wasn't a genuine bust. It was too precise, too theatrical. He was processed quickly, the charges laid out with chilling efficiency: grand larceny, conspiracy, and resisting arrest. The evidence, fabricated with an unsettling attention to detail, painted him as a career criminal, a known associate of the very low-level thugs he'd been infiltrating. This was no ordinary arrest. This was a setup designed not just to incarcerate Jax, but to publicly humiliate and silence him. The orchestrator of this elaborate charade was, predictably, the very target of his investigation, Judge Alistair Finch. The moment Ben was brought into the courtroom, the air crackled with a malevolent energy. The courtroom was dimly lit, the public gallery sparse. Sitting on the bench, an imposing figure in his black robes, was Judge Finch. His face, usually a mask of detached judicial authority, held a subtle smirk, a glint of cruel satisfaction in his eyes. He clearly relished this display of power. The charges, stemming from a fabricated past criminal act attributed to Ben's undercover persona, struck at the core of his sense of justice, a direct affront to everything he stood for. Ben's immediate reaction was a controlled storm of fury, an icy anger that threatened to crack his carefully maintained composure. But beneath it, his tactical mind was already calculating, assessing every angle. He struggled with the raw, visceral desire to expose Finch immediately, to tear down the corrupt edifice there and then, versus the strategic imperative to maintain his cover for the greater good of the mission. The lives of innocent victims, the potential to dismantle a vast criminal enterprise. These outweighed his personal gratification. Yet, as Judge Finch began his opening remarks, his voice dripping with condescension, a more profound emotion surged within Ben. Finch wasn't just condemning Jax the criminal, he was condemning Ben himself, drawing on the fabricated criminal past with a chilling personal condemnation. "Mr. Jax," Finch intoned, his voice resonating with false gravity, "your record, as presented to this court, paints a picture of a man utterly devoid of respect for the law, a habitual offender who seeks to undermine the very fabric of our society. A man, dare I say, with a history of regrettable associations and a profound disregard for the consequences of his actions." Each word was a calculated jab, designed to strip away any semblance of dignity. This public accusation, however, ignited a long-suppressed personal pain within Ben. The phrase, "history of regrettable associations," echoed a deeper, more profound injustice he carried, a loss that had shaped his entire adult life. He thought of the worn locket beneath his shirt, the faded photograph of the woman and child. The injustice he now faced mirrored the injustice that had shattered his own world years ago, strengthening his resolve to not just expose, but to dismantle Finch's entire corrupt empire. This wasn't merely a tactical operation anymore. It was a deeply personal crusade. The gavel struck, a sharp, final sound. "Given the overwhelming evidence," Judge Finch declared, his eyes fixed on Ben with a chilling intensity, "and your clearly established pattern of criminal behavior, This court finds you, Jax, guilty on all counts." He paused, savoring the moment before delivering the final blow. "I hereby sentence you to 20 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole. Let this serve as a stark reminder that justice, in my courtroom, is absolute." The severity of the sentence was disproportionate, a deliberate overreach designed to silence him permanently. 20 years. It was a life sentence for an innocent man, a public act of humiliation and incarceration that made it impossible for Ben to simply escape or continue his operation in the shadows. This was the point of no return. He realized then that mere defense was insufficient. He had to actively expose Finch, not just for the mission's success and the integrity of the agency, but to clear his own name, to reclaim his identity, and to confront the injustice directly, publicly, even if it meant risking his life and his carefully cultivated undercover persona. The facade of Jax had served its purpose. Now, Ben Carter, agent of justice and a man with a deeply personal score to settle, would have to emerge from the shadows. The battle lines were drawn, not just in the sterile confines of the courtroom, but in the depths of a past that refused to stay buried. The judge's gavel strike echoed, a death knell for Jax, but a call to arms for Ben Carter. 20 years. The pronouncement was meant to crush, to bury him in the anonymity of the federal prison system, but for Ben, it was a gauntlet thrown, a personal invitation to war. He was trapped in Finch's web, yet this entrapment offered the perfect, brutal intimacy for their inevitable confrontation. During the initial court proceedings, Ben's undercover lawyer, a young public defender unwittingly caught in the agency's elaborate sting, performed a perfunctory defense. Finch, meanwhile, reveled in his perceived triumph, his pronouncements laced with a smug, almost theatrical righteousness. He paraded a string of falsified evidence and coached witnesses, painting Jax as the epitome of urban decay, a menace to society. Ben, observing from the defendant's table, maintained a facade of weary resignation. But beneath the surface, his mind raced, seeking an opening, a weakness in Finch's carefully constructed performance. He didn't initially reveal his true identity or the vast scope of his mission. Instead, his deeper personal motivation subtly influenced his responses, a quiet probe designed to unsettle Finch without blowing his cover. When given a chance to speak, Ben's voice was low, gravelly from disuse, fitting his Jax persona. "Your Honor," he began, his eyes fixed on Finch, a subtle challenge in their depths. "You speak of justice, of consequences. Yet I recall a time, not so long ago, when justice in this very courtroom seemed flexible, particularly concerning a certain land development project, roughly 15 years back, involving the rezoning of municipal parkland. A small, obscure case, perhaps, but one where the consequences, for some, were profoundly irreversible." Finch's almost imperceptible flinch was all the confirmation Ben needed. The judge's composure, usually unshakable, flickered. His eyes narrowed, a cold glint replacing the smug satisfaction. The case Ben mentioned was indeed obscure, buried deep in the archives, meticulously scrubbed of any irregularities. It had been one of Finch's early brazen acts of corruption, a clear example of illicit rezoning that had led to the displacement of an entire low-income community and the sudden, unexplained closure of a small, family-owned construction firm that had initially opposed the development. How could this disheveled criminal, Jax, know about it, let alone bring it up with such quiet, pointed authority? Finch dismissed it as a desperate criminal's bluff, a random shot in the dark, reinforcing his arrogant belief in his own invincibility. But a seed of unease had been planted. The only other person to truly grasp the significance of Ben's words was Agent Miller, his handler, who was observing the proceedings remotely from a secure off-site location. Miller's gaze, usually focused on the tactical minutiae of the operation, sharpened. She saw the subtle tightening of Finch's jaw, the fleeting shift in his eyes. She knew Ben's history, knew the depth of his personal motivation for this specific target. His precision, his unexpected depth of knowledge about Finch's obscure past, confirmed her suspicions. Ben had a deeper, personal stake in this operation than he had ever revealed. It wasn't just about professional duty. It was about a deeply held personal vendetta for a hidden loss. Following Ben's subtle probe, Judge Finch, disturbed by the unexpected insight, reacted with escalating ruthlessness. He wasn't just interested in condemning Jax anymore. He was determined to silence him, personally and irrevocably. He used his influence to subtly manipulate the legal system further, ensuring that Jax's appeals would be swiftly denied, his legal aid minimized, and any attempts to introduce new evidence would be immediately quashed. He even leaked carefully curated, falsified snippets of Jax's fabricated criminal past to a sensationalist online tabloid, painting him as a dangerous, unstable individual prone to violent outbursts. A smear campaign designed to discredit any future claims Jax might make. "This is not merely about justice for a crime," Finch declared to a select group of media contacts, his voice radiating righteous indignation, but about protecting the integrity of our courts from desperate, manipulative individuals who seek to undermine them. His actions were driven by a chilling fear of exposure, not just of his current web of corruption, but of a deeper, unspoken past that Ben seemed to threaten, a past that held the key to his own rise to power. This escalation solidified Finch as a ruthless, Type A antagonist, a pure villain willing to go to extreme lengths to maintain his power and suppress any echoes of his dark history. The battle lines were no longer confined to the courtroom. They extended into the shadows of Finch's past, setting the stage for a confrontation that would expose not just a corrupt judge, but a chilling personal truth. The judge's gavel strike in Chapter 2 had sentenced Jax to 20 years. Ben's calculated probe in Chapter 3 had ignited Finch's fear. Now, the chess pieces were moving towards their inevitable, brutal checkmate. Ben, languishing in a high-security holding cell, felt the pressure mount with each passing hour. Finch's network, a sprawling octopus of influence, ensured that every avenue of appeal was blocked, every plea dismissed. He was a ghost in the system, trapped in a cage of fabricated evidence, his very identity a liability. Finch, fueled by a simmering unease from Ben's veiled reference to the past, orchestrated a highly publicized last-ditch appeal hearing. This wasn't about due process. It was about public humiliation and definitive silence. The setting was none other than Courtroom 3B, the very chamber where Finch had dispensed his corrupt justice for years, a gilded cage adorned with the symbols of law he routinely mocked. Finch intended for this public stage to be Ben's final undoing, where his criminality would be irrevocably stamped, and his desperate pleas for truth dismissed as the rantings of a convicted felon. The media, subtly manipulated by Finch's PR team, buzzed with the promise of a sensational end to the Jax saga. Ben knew this was it. His undercover lawyer, a young, earnest public defender named Sarah Chen, could only offer minimal, controlled assistance, careful not to blow the intricate operation. The core battle of wits and will was solely between Ben and Judge Finch. Ben had to rely on his own intellect, the meticulous evidence he had gathered over months, and the iron strength of his personal conviction. One wrong move, one false step, and the mission would collapse, leaving him permanently incarcerated, his true identity forever buried, his personal quest for justice utterly extinguished. He was utterly alone in this fight, armed only with truth against a Goliath of corruption. The ticking clock was palpable. The appeal was scheduled to be heard and dismissed within a single brutal morning session. Finch's operatives were already subtly interfering. A crucial digital file, meant to be uploaded by Sarah, mysteriously corrupted. A minor witness, whom Ben hoped to subtly manipulate into revealing a discrepancy, was suddenly unreachable. Every obstacle was designed to heighten the urgency, pushing Ben to his absolute limits. The dramatic irony was excruciating. The assembled media and legal professionals, unaware of Ben's true identity, watched a simple criminal appeal, oblivious to the impending explosion of a lifetime of corruption and a deeply personal vengeance. From his holding cell, Ben meticulously went over his plan. He had gathered digital evidence of Finch's offshore accounts, call logs connecting him to known crime figures, and detailed schematics of the municipal parkland development project he had mentioned in his previous appearance. But he needed more than just evidence of current corruption. He needed a direct link to Finch's past, something that would resonate with his own buried grief. He recalled a detail from his research into the Parkland project, something Agent Miller had dismissed as irrelevant, a small, almost undetectable watermark on a faded land deed from that time. a stylized phoenix rising from flames. It was the symbol of the very small family-owned construction firm that had initially opposed Finch's development, a firm that had mysteriously gone bankrupt and its owner vanished. Ben had a chilling gut feeling about it. He also remembered a specific, obscure legal precedent Finch had cited during that long-ago case, a precedent that was later overturned, but which had, at the time, allowed the controversial rezoning to proceed. It was a detail only a highly trained legal professional, or someone deeply affected by the outcome of that case, would recall. It was a subtle, yet potent thread leading directly to the heart of Finch's hidden past. The morning of the appeal, the courtroom was packed. Finch sat on the bench, an aura of smug satisfaction radiating from him. He delivered a chilling opening statement, detailing Jax's fabricated crimes with relish, portraying him as the epitome of irredeemable villainy. Ben, dressed in a standard prison jumpsuit, was led in, his face etched with a controlled weariness. He caught Agent Miller's eye in the gallery, a brief, almost imperceptible nod of reassurance. He knew she was ready, her team poised to act the moment he gave the signal. But the first move had to be his. The appeals process began, a grim charade designed to fast-track Ben's condemnation. Sarah Chen, his public defender, presented her arguments, weak by design, against the fabricated evidence. Finch interrupted frequently, dismissing her points with thinly veiled contempt. The time pressure was immense. Finch was clearly rushing to judgment, eager to put this nuisance behind him. "Mr. Jax," Finch sneered, "do you have anything to add before this court delivers its final definitive judgment? Any last desperate falsehoods you wish to peddle?" Ben rose slowly, his gaze locking with Finch's. He spoke, his voice low but cutting through the hushed courtroom like a scalpel. "Your Honor, you spoke of irreparable damage, of lives ruined by a disregard for the law. I've heard those words before, in this very courtroom, 15 years ago, regarding the municipal parkland rezoning. A case where you cited a specific obscure precedent that allowed for the forced acquisition of property, a precedent that was later overturned. It was a clear abuse of power, Judge. A legal technicality used to destroy innocent lives for profit." Finch's face, usually so impassive, contorted. His eyes darted nervously, a flicker of genuine alarm replacing his smugness. The mention of the overturned precedent, so precise, so obscure, unnerved him. It was a detail meticulously scrubbed from public memory, known only to a very select few. "Objection!" he thundered, slamming his gavel. "Irrelevant! The defendant is attempting to malign the court with baseless accusations." "Baseless?" Ben countered, his voice rising, gaining a powerful resonance. "Or just inconvenient, Your Honor? Just like the convenient disappearance of the Thorne construction firm, the small family-owned company that dared to oppose your development. The firm whose owner, a man named Michael Thorne, mysteriously vanished after losing everything in that legal battle." At the mention of Michael Thorne, Finch's face went white. A visible tremor ran through his hand as he gripped the gavel. He looked at Ben, not as a criminal, but with a dawning, terrifying recognition. His eyes, wide with horror, scanned Ben's face, searching for something familiar, something he had desperately tried to erase from his memory. Ben slowly reached inside his jumpsuit. His movements were deliberate, unhurried, commanding the attention of the entire courtroom. He pulled out the worn silver locket. He held it up, letting the light catch its tarnished surface. Then, with a quiet click, he opened it, revealing the faded photograph of a young woman and a child. He held it so that the entire courtroom could see the small, distinct birthmark on the child's temple, a mirror image of the one on his own. "You took everything from him, Judge," Ben said, his voice now raw with unsuppressed emotion, yet unwavering. "His business, his home, his future. And then, when he was broken, when he was in no position to fight, you used your power to rip his family apart. You orchestrated the adoption of his only child, telling everyone he was unfit, that he had vanished. You thought you'd buried him and his truth forever." He locked eyes with Finch, a silent, devastating accusation passing between them. "Michael Thorne was my brother, Your Honor, and that child was his daughter, my niece. My sister-in-law, his wife, died shortly after from a broken heart, knowing you destroyed their lives. My mission wasn't just about exposing your corruption, Judge. It was about avenging my family. It was about justice for Michael Thorne. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs, and the frantic clicking of cameras filled the air. Finch, utterly shattered, stared at Ben, not seeing Jax the criminal, but the vengeful ghost of his past, the brother of the man he had ruthlessly destroyed. His body trembled, his perfect facade utterly annihilated. The stage, meant for his triumph, had become the arena for his spectacular undoing, not just as a corrupt judge, but as a man haunted by the irreversible damage he had wrought. The ultimate test was over, and Ben Carter, the quiet agent, had delivered a justice far more profound than any legal sentence. The glittering ballroom, once a stage for celebration, now hummed with the electric aftermath of a truth unveiled. Robert and Eleanor Vance stood utterly exposed, their carefully constructed world having shattered around them. Eleanor, pale and trembling, leaned heavily on Robert, who stared at Leo with a mixture of terror and dawning, gut-wrenching realization. The dignified facade they had maintained for decades had crumbled, revealing the raw anguish of their well-intentioned but deeply flawed deception. As Leo held Alara, a profound silence enveloped the room, broken only by a few muffled sobs from Eleanor. The guests, initially shocked spectators, now shifted their gazes, their expressions moving from judgment to a quiet, almost sympathetic understanding of the complex human drama unfolding before them. They saw not malice but misguided love, not villains but deeply flawed individuals grappling with the consequences of their choices. Later that night, in the quiet solitude of the Vance family study, the true reckoning began. Robert and Eleanor sat across from Alara and Leo, the air thick with unspoken words and years of suppressed pain. Eleanor was weeping softly, her usual composure utterly gone. Robert, his shoulders slumped, finally broke the silence. "Alara," he began, his voice hoarse, devoid of its usual authority. "Your mother and we are so profoundly sorry." He looked at Leo, his gaze filled with a desperate plea for understanding. "Leo, after the fire, you were so broken. The doctor said you might not recover. You thought, we truly believed we were doing what was best for everyone, for you to heal without that constant, agonizing reminder, for Alara to have a stable, loving home, free from the chaos and tragedy." Eleanor, through her tears, added, "We loved you, Alara, from the moment we saw you. We wanted to protect you from that pain. We thought we were sparing you. It was never out of malice, only fear. And love." Leo, still pale from the shock of his dramatic reveal, listened intently, his gaze unwavering. "You took my daughter," he said, his voice quiet, almost mournful, "and you buried me alive. You took away my right to mourn, my right to heal as her father." His words, though devoid of anger, carried the weight of 2 decades of profound loss. Alara, now calmer, stepped forward. "I understand you thought you were protecting me," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "And I know you loved me, but you also took away my history, my right to know who I am, where I come from, and you took away his right to be my father." She looked at Leo, then back at her adoptive parents. The truth, no matter how painful, always sets you free. The adoptive parents, the misguided antagonists, faced the immediate emotional consequences of their deception. There was no legal punishment, no public shaming beyond the gala, but their carefully constructed family narrative had irrevocably collapsed. Their lives, once so orderly and predictable, were now permeated by a profound sense of regret and remorse. They acknowledged the immense harm their well-intentioned but harmful actions had caused. Robert, with a surprising display of vulnerability, offered to share all the original documents, every hidden detail of Alara's birth and Leo's recovery, a gesture of transparency designed to begin the arduous journey of trust. Eleanor, once so rigid, simply held out her hand to Leo, a silent plea for forgiveness. The most significant new opportunity, however, was for Alara herself. Her quest for truth had culminated not just in a revelation, but in the chance to build a genuine, multifaceted family. She now had 2 sets of parents, each with their own unique love and history to offer. It was a complex, beautiful tapestry, woven with threads of biological connection and profound adoptive love. This wasn't merely a material gain, it was a profound emotional and identity-based resolution. Alara began spending time with Leo, listening to his stories of her biological parents, artists just like her. She learned about their passions, their dreams, and the vibrant life they had cultivated in that small cottage. She learned about Leo's own journey of recovery, his quiet resilience, and the immense love that had compelled him to watch over her from afar. She was able to integrate her biological family history into her sense of self, finding a deeper sense of belonging and completion she hadn't known was missing. The Vances, in their journey towards healing, began to actively support Alara's relationship with Leo. Robert offered Leo a substantial grant to restart his life, knowing the financial struggles he had endured. Eleanor, with surprising humility, began attending support groups for adoptive parents, seeking to understand the complexities of open adoption and the needs of adoptees. They were truly seeking reconciliation, not just with Alara and Leo, but with the moral compass they had inadvertently compromised. A few weeks after the gala, Alara sat with Leo in a quiet park, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot. The locket, now on a chain around Alara's neck, gleamed in the sunlight. Leo sketched quietly in a small notebook, a habit Alara recognized from her own biological mother's journals. "It's strange," Alara mused, "to suddenly have so many stories, so many memories that aren't my own, but are part of me." "They are your own now, Alara," Leo replied, his voice soft. "They were always waiting for you. And your adoptive parents. They loved you, in their own way. We all have a place in your heart now." Alara nodded, looking at the locket. "You were always there, Leo, even when I didn't know it." Leo smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that Alara had only seen in her dreams. "And I always will be." Later, Alara had a more tentative conversation with Robert and Eleanor. They had requested her presence, wanting to fully acknowledge their mistakes. "We want to learn, Alara," Robert confessed, his voice heavy with sincerity. "To understand what you needed, what we failed to give you, despite our best intentions." Eleanor, eyes still red-rimmed, spoke of attending a seminar on adoptee rights, her voice reflecting a newfound humility. This dialogue, though difficult, reinforced Alara's personal growth, her courage in seeking truth, and the broader themes of the story regarding identity, the complex nature of family, and the profound power of honesty. The new calm was not the absence of ripples, but the deeper, more profound peace that comes from embracing a full, authentic truth, even when it demands painful confessions and arduous forgiveness. The journey of rebuilding was just beginning, but it was a journey taken with open hearts and a newfound understanding. The courtroom, moments ago a sterile chamber of legal procedure, now throbbed with the raw, volatile energy of revelation. Judge Alistair Finch, his face a ghastly mask of disbelief and terror, stumbled back, clutching the edge of the bench. The mention of Michael Thorne, and then the revelation of Ben's familial connection, had shattered his carefully constructed reality. His eyes, wide and unfocused, darted between Ben and the stunned faces in the gallery, as if searching for an escape from the public reckoning. "My brother." Ben's voice, though quieter now, resonated with devastating finality. "His daughter, my niece." He stood there, not as Jax, the hardened criminal, but as Ben Carter, the grieving brother, the relentless agent of justice. The worn silver locket, now openly displayed, seemed to hum with the weight of its untold story, a silent accusation against the man on the bench. A wave of murmurs swept through the courtroom, quickly escalating into a roar of outrage. Journalists, initially focused on a simple criminal trial, scrambled, their frantic clicks and flashes capturing Finch's spectacular downfall. Legal professionals whispered, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning horror, as the layers of Finch's corruption, now inextricably linked to a profound personal betrayal, were laid bare. Within minutes, the courtroom doors burst open and a contingent of uniformed officers, not Finch's usual corrupt cronies but genuine federal agents, swarmed in. Agent Miller, Ben's handler, stepped forward, her face grim but resolute. She gave a silent nod to Ben, a brief acknowledgement of his extraordinary achievement. "Judge Alistair Finch," Agent Miller announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. "You are under arrest for multiple counts of bribery, obstruction of justice, abuse of power, and conspiracy to defraud. This investigation has been ongoing for over 2 years, culminating in the testimony presented here today by Special Agent Benjamin Carter." At the mention of his true name and rank, Finch let out a guttural cry, a sound of pure, unadulterated despair. He lunged forward, a desperate, pathetic attempt to silence Ben, but he was quickly restrained by the agents. His empire, built on greed, deceit, and a chilling disregard for human lives, was crumbling around him. Judge Finch, the pure villain, faced immediate and severe consequences. He was swiftly led away, his protests dissolving into incoherent mumbles, his powerful reputation irrevocably shattered. The network of corrupt associates he had cultivated began to unravel almost immediately, as arrests were made in court and across the city. This marked the beginning of a broader cleanup of the judicial system, a ripple effect stemming from Ben's singular act of truth. His fate was stark, a clear and public consequence of his decades of injustice. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Ben was debriefed, his undercover persona officially retired. The charges against Jax were immediately expunged, and a formal commendation for his extraordinary service was quietly prepared by the agency. His name, though kept out of the general public eye for his safety, became legendary within the anti-corruption unit. For Ben, the most significant new opportunity wasn't just professional, it was profoundly personal. The success of his mission brought him a sense of closure he hadn't dared to hope for. He had avenged Michael, honored his sister-in-law's memory, and, in doing so, had found a deeper meaning in his own life. He was offered a high-profile position within a newly formed Special Anti-Corruption Task Force, allowing him to continue his fight for justice on a broader scale, using the very systems he had once been forced to dismantle from within. This role allowed him to blend his personal conviction with his professional expertise, a rare and fulfilling alignment. Days later, Ben sat in a quiet, secluded park, the autumn leaves a vibrant tapestry around him. Agent Miller joined him, a rare moment of stillness for both of them. "You did good, Ben," Miller said, her voice softer than usual. "Better than good. You blew it all wide open." Ben nodded, gazing at the sun glinting off the worn silver locket in his hand. It was for Michael. For them. He looked at Miller, a faint, weary smile touching his lips. "You knew, didn't you? About Michael. About my connection to Finch." Miller met his gaze. "I suspected, from the way you pursued this case, the details you picked up, the sheer tenacity. Most agents have a drive, but yours was different. It was personal." She paused. "I can't imagine the weight you've carried all these years, what you sacrificed." "The sacrifice was worth it," Ben replied, his voice firm. "Justice was served, for Michael, for all the others Finch crushed." He ran his thumb over the locket, its surface smooth and familiar. "It doesn't bring them back, but it means they didn't suffer in vain." Their dialogue was brief, yet deeply meaningful. It was a reflection on the intricate journey they had shared, the profound lessons learned about the insidious nature of corruption, the resilience of truth, and the enduring power of personal conviction. Ben's growth was evident. From a lone, grieving agent consumed by a personal quest, he had emerged as a celebrated agent, finding purpose and a quiet sense of peace in the justice he had finally delivered. The system, though still imperfect, was a little cleaner, a little more just, thanks to his unwavering resolve. The first steps towards healing were taken, not in forgetting, but in honoring the past through the triumph of truth. 1 year later, the shadowy world of an undercover operative was a distant memory for Benjamin Carter. The grim apartment, the constant vigilance, the fabricated identity, all had faded, replaced by a life rich with purpose and a profound sense of peace. He was no longer defined by his past, but by how he had confronted it, transforming his deep-seated grief into a relentless pursuit of justice that now illuminated his path. Ben had become a pivotal figure in the National Anti-Corruption Task Force. His intimate understanding of the underworld, combined with his unwavering persistence, made him an invaluable asset. He regularly lectured new FBI recruits and senior law enforcement officers, sharing hard-won lessons on resilience and the subtle indicators of corruption. He was more than a leader. He was a mentor, a living testament that justice could prevail even in the darkest corners of power. He'd found a healthier balance between his professional dedication and his personal well-being. The ache of losing Michael and his family remained, a phantom limb of sorrow, but it was now soothed by a renewed sense of meaning. Ben frequently visited a community center built on the very parkland that Judge Finch had illegally rezoned years ago. This center, a vibrant symbol of reclamation and justice, offered free legal aid and support programs for victims of systemic abuse and corruption. This was Ben's way of paying it forward, ensuring that the sacrifices of his past and the truth he had unearthed served a greater good, preventing others from suffering fates similar to Michael Thorne's. He had also quietly established the Michael Thorne Scholarship Fund, supporting aspiring law students facing financial hardship. These students were committed to pursuing ethical careers within the justice system, a deeply personal act of honor to his brother, ensuring Michael's legacy would be remembered and justice continuously upheld. One sun-drenched afternoon, Ben stood silently by a newly erected memorial in the community center's sprawling garden. The monument, crafted from gleaming black granite, bore the names of those whose lives had been irrevocably harmed by Finch's corruption, prominently featuring Michael Thorne's name. The late afternoon sun cast a warm glow, illuminating the polished surface. Ben slowly reached up, touching the worn silver locket that now hung openly around his neck. No longer hidden beneath an undercover operative's rough clothing, it was a visible emblem of the truth revealed. He opened the locket. Inside, the faded photograph of Michael, his wife, and their young daughter gazed back at him. Their faces, once a source of agonizing grief, now brought a quiet solace. He no longer felt the burning anger or the crushing despair. Instead, a profound serenity settled over him. Ben had fought, and he had won. He had brought justice for Michael, and in doing so, he had found his own profound sense of purpose. His gaze, once burdened by the shadows of his undercover life, now reflected the unwavering resolve of a man who had found both meaning and peace. He closed the locket, the soft click echoing in the peaceful garden. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, whispering stories of a turbulent past and a future built on the foundation of restored justice. Benjamin Carter had emerged from the shadows, and the light of truth now illuminated his path. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies, and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.